Hi there, it's Lisa. I have a fall page for us today. I've got 5 photos that were taken when we were out hunting pretty leaves. This fall it's been a little bit of a hunt. We had a really rainy summer and then since the 1st of September it's hardly rained at all. And I don't know which of those or if it's a combination of those has just kind of reduced the fall color, but it's been hard to find. And so I've got several photos here where we were out looking for pretty leaves, and I want to arrange them with the 3x5 photos along the top and then the 2 square photos in the bottom. And I want to use some of my tree embellishments. I've got 2 different kinds. I've got these from Kaiser Craft that are rather intricate, and then I have these from Maya Road. I'm leaning towards the Maya Road ones because I think the style of these go better with the other embellishment that I want to use, and that's the stencil. This is a Claudine Helmuth stencil, and I haven't even used it at all yet, so it's not even the least bit dirty. I'm going to break it in on this layout, and my first thought was to do these and cut them out, but since these are already cut out as embellishments, the scale bothered me a little bit. I had great big leaves and the little tiny trees. So I decided to use them more in the background on the background paper. The papers for the layout are Imagine-S, and I really love this yellow chevron. The ironic thing about it is on the backside are leaves. And I could use the backside. It wasn't too busy with the photos, but I just love the yellow chevron, so I thought I would add my own leaves to it and do some stenciling with this. So I only have the 1 piece of paper, as usual, so I've got to figure out the best way to do this, probably using some scrap paper. I also have this tree paper, and then this really pretty, I guess that's a chevron design that I want to use a little bit of on the paper. So I have some other places here to put designer paper. And for some reason, I like to put buttons with trees. I don't know where I got that from, but I just usually do. I don't know, maybe it's a homey kind of thing for fall. Anyway, so first thing up is to figure out how to use the stencil on the chevron paper. What would be the best material to work with? And I have a scrap piece of yellow paper that's just left over from something, so I thought that was close enough in color that I could experiment with. I'm going to start with some distress inks and see if those work, and they may be all I need. I could try paint. I've got gelatos. I've got a lot of different things I can work with, but I thought I'd try the distress inks first. So what I'm going to do is just lay this down here. I'm not going to worry too much about placement. I'm just going to experiment and see how the colors look with the stencil on the yellow, and if they come through good working with the sponges. Okay, I'm going to speed things up here a bit, just trying each of these different colors. This is Rusty Hinge. Seeing how each of them look on the yellow. The only thing that's happening here is because these items are very close together on the stencil, as I use the sponges, I'm bleeding over. And so I'm going to have to do something about covering that if I want my leaves scattered out on the paper. I'm looking at combining a couple of colors using the vintage photo over top of one of the other colors to add a little depth. And then this is peeled paint. And I like all of these colors. Let's see how they look with the photos. Looks like a good match, as I say, except for just that extra ink. So what I've done is put post-it notes around all of this, and my intention was to do individual leaves here and there, but I realized I was making this way too hard. That the distress inks are designed to combine, and in nature leaves have multiple colors on them, so it would make more sense if I just laid this down and just inked all the leaves and sort of work on them individually. But if a color bleeds over into another color because the sponge sort of gets over into one of the other leaves, that's okay. It's still going to look like nature. So that's what I ended up doing. It does put the leaves a lot closer together, so it gives a different effect than what I kind of planned to start with. There's that Rusty Hinge again, and I did find that the post-it notes were great for holding the stencil in place. Adding some vintage photo here. Working the sponge down into the leaves, and I use Stampin' Up! Sponges. I prefer these to the Ranger tool for applying inks because they're rounded. You don't end up with any hard edges, and you can really work them down into things like these this delicate stencil. Alright, I like that, and I'm ready to move that over to the next section because it's looking good with the photos. I don't think, though, I'm going to come all the way down. As I place the photos there, I realize that maybe I don't want too much of this, so I might just do one row of stencil. Again, holding it in place with the post-it notes, and starting with some of the lighter colors. I think I'm going to make Vintage Photo the last color to go on this time, rather than the peeled paint, because Vintage Photo goes with everything, so it doesn't really matter what it gets on top of. Some of that green. Peeled paint is a very dark green. It's kind of surprising to me how dark it comes out each time I use it. It's a pretty color. And then I'm going to kind of skip over a little bit of this last part because it's the same thing. I'm just repeating the stencil a third time, going across and adding the last little touch of ink, and then there are my leaves across the top. I'll still have plenty of yellow, and then I'm going to have a border down here at the bottom of some of the other papers. My plan is to use this tree paper and some of the chevron. I'm starting to have some second thoughts though, because that tree paper is a really light color, and the top of this is awfully heavy, and you'll see this in the wider shot. If I use that tree paper with all the white in it, it just, for one thing, it's very busy, and the second thing is it doesn't really balance with the top of the page. The page is overweighted on the top. It's really what happens. The back side of it is a brown wood grain, and that would make a nice trim that was on the sketch. The sketch had a larger piece of paper at the bottom and then a little bit of narrow paper on top of it. So that's what I think I'm going to do. I'm just looking at matting the photos. This is a dark chocolate matte. I haven't decided for sure whether they even need matting. Put my trees here to kind of, again, get a feel for how it's all going to come together. And then in the middle, having my letters, again, I'm looking at some cardstock to put those on. Now, I do my sketches, the way I print them out is they're 6 by 6, and I'm doing a 12 by 12 page, so I just double everything. So I measured that bottom, and I had a 1-inch band there. I'm just going to double it to 2 inches when I cut it, and then I know I have the right size, the right proportion for everything. Now, I've got my letters here, and I'm not certain that I'm going to leave them on that yellow background. I'm going to either put them on cardstock, or I'm going to stick with the yellow background. I really like the yellow background. So I didn't have any other color, so I ended up with a mistable, and I've got to mist them in something, and it looks like there's a green here that's going to be the best color that will go both with the background and with the brown paper. As you can probably tell, I like to not make every decision at the beginning. I kind of work out things as I go. So making them green, by misting them in the green, I had some flexibility, because I had looked at even doing brown letters, and that wasn't going to work if I used a brown background. I've decided to put the letters directly on the yellow, and I'm considering maybe doing some washi tape as a frame around them. That was better in theory than in actuality. I didn't really care for the washi tape too much once I got it down there. I just wasn't really sure what to do, whether I was going to put cardstock around it or anything around it, so I decided just to glue the letters on. And they're glued in place, and I'm taking some cardstock and I'm going to cut some strips of it and try that. I'm distressing the edge with a distressing tool, and I'm going to cut some narrow strips out of this cardstock. This is the new brown sugar color from Stampin' Up. I don't have much of this left, but I know I'll be buying more of it because I've used it a lot already. And I've got a strip at the top and the bottom, and I really like how that frames things. And I have some little tiny square brads that I may put on there. Let's look about doing the sides. I'm doing the same thing, just taking the distressing tool and making a rough edge, because it's easier to do it before I cut it, since these are going to be such narrow strips. And I'll come back here in a minute with the strips for the sides. Laying those down, and very quickly realized I didn't like that. I like the top and the bottom, did not like the sides. So everything's looking pretty good, except the word "for" there in the middle is taking up too much space going vertically. I had tried the number 4 when I first put the letters down, and I didn't care for it. So I think those are going to have to change.
out somehow or another. And what I've decided to do is put them side by side. Fortunately, they hadn't stuck down too much. They're October afternoon stickers, and they stick really well, but fortunately I hadn't pressed these down too hard. So I was able to squeeze the word for in, and I really like this. Now I'll just have to add those little brads, and that will finish off that framing there in the middle. It's about time to paint the trees, and I'm going to use some of the colors that I've been working with, the yellows and oranges and the greens. And I painted the trunks brown, and then I just used regular old craft paint to do each of the leaf part, and then I'm going to add some stamping over the top. I'm going to give them a little more interest using background stamps, and many of these I'm doing double layers of it. Like the swirls, I can go over that 2 or 3 times and get a lot more design. The same thing, this is like a zebra pattern, but it looks sort of like branches for a tree. Background stamps are just so versatile. I use them all the time. And I went over this twice because that green is very bright. It's almost neon. I'm not sure it's going to work out. The polka dots I'm only going to put 1 layer on. I don't think that'd look good if I did 2. Laying the trunks on top to see how they're coming along. And again, the green tree is awfully bright. I want to check it on the layout and see how it comes out. It's almost like a neon green, and it's just not quite working. So what I'm going to do to help that a little bit, I hope, is to take some green ink. I think this is Pear Pizzazz I'm Stampin' Up, and a green sponge, and just go around the edges and see if that helps. I may have to repaint it. And here I was pleasantly surprised that it looked better. Got my trunks. I don't know which trunk is supposed to go with which. It's just the ones that I liked with it. And it ended up looking a whole lot better. Now the last thing that I need is a stamp, and my camera had some issues here. I ran out of room on the camera is what happened. So I stamped a greeting up above looking for leaves in brown ink. You just aren't going to see that.
Here's our completed page. So we've got our 3 photos. I decided not to mat them. I didn't feel like they needed matting after I worked with them a little bit. For my title, instead of doing it in a block, I just did a couple of strips down here. And then I have the 3 tree and a button embellishments that I had planned. I do confess that I got so run up in doing the title and all that I forgot about the journaling until I'd already put these strips on. So I had to figure out where to put the journaling, and what I decided to do was just to put it with each of the embellishment groups. I was going to put a little bit down here and a little bit up here, so that kind of labels the photos and does the journaling. So here's some close-ups. I really love these Maya Road trees. I think the pack has 6 more of them, so I'm sure they will appear on other projects. Misted letters, those always work out really well. So anyway, that's my page. Thank you for watching.